Hello, BookTube. There's a new BookTube event coming to you in just a few days. I've mentioned it on this channel a couple of times. It's Dune in June, an event in which, at the beginning of summer, we read Frank Herbert's masterpiece, Dune. A big, ambitious science fiction novel that a lot of people have read, but not in a long time, and that a lot of people have put off reading because they've either seen the various TV or movie adaptations and think they get the gist, or it intimidates them a bit. And I made a video recently addressing that latter group of people. People who might be thinking, oh, this is a lot to take on, and who rightly realize that Frank Herbert is not slowing down much for you. It's important to understand that there are no suffering points in reading. There shouldn't be. Anyone who tells you that there is probably a book snob. There are no points for suffering in reading. The point is to get to the dramatic craft, the storytelling of the author. And you shouldn't be ashamed or reluctant to take steps that you need to get rid of the impediments to that, to get to the storytelling. You shouldn't worry about that. So I made a video that was a Dune primer. What you need to know about the setting, the premise of this book before you launch into reading it for the first time. And that premise is very simple. This is a far, far future world, but no Federation of planets, no aliens, all still just humans. It's an imperium run by an emperor, but populated by great and minor houses, ducal houses. Landed gentry, dukes, barons, lords, and ladies, populate and run this imperium according to their own schemes and devices. They have homeworlds and private armies of their own, although none of their armies are a match for the Emperor's own army, the Sardaukar, who are fearsome warriors that are largely, have a reputation of being largely unbeatable. And the basic premise of this novel, the first of the Dune books, is that one of those houses, House Atreides, is ordered by the Emperor to pack up and leave their homeworld of Caladan, a lush water world that they've been on for a long time, and take over the fiefdom of the desert planet Dune. Take it away from House Harkonnen, the lifelong enemies of the Atreides, and the bad guys of the book, who've been on the planet Dune for quite some time, extracting not only its most valuable natural resource, but the most valuable natural resource anywhere in the Imperium, the spice melange, which exists nowhere else in all the thousands of worlds of this planetary system, and which, in addition to lengthening life and being incredibly addictive, also is used as a catalyst for various superhuman abilities, both in the secret society of the Bene Gesserit and in the Spacing Guild, whose navigators use the spice melange in order to plot the courses of faster-than-light space travel that makes the whole Imperium possible. Without faster-than-light space travel, everyone is locked on their own planet. And if you want to go to the nearest planet, well, okay, you take 70,000 years to get there. You certainly don't bring legions of warriors and conduct commerce. It's faster-than-light travel that makes that possible, and it's melange that makes that travel possible. The Harkonnens, therefore, have been getting rich off the planet Dune and oppressing it, violently oppressing it. And the Emperor orders that to be changed. He orders House Harkonnen to leave and House Atreides to go into Dune. That's the premise of this book. Duke Atreides knows that he is walking into a trap of some kind. It doesn't make sense any other way. The Emperor is not fond of him. The Harkonnens hate him. So the only way this makes sense is if it's a trap. He doesn't have an alternative. As far as he's concerned, he doesn't have an alternative but to do it and somehow survive it. And that is the premise. That is what's happening in the early chapters of this book. The Atreides are getting ready to leave Caladan and go to Dune. I made that video as a Dune primer to take a little bit of the topspin of intimidation off this thing for those of you who are approaching it for the first time. But I want to make another video along the same lines today, introducing you to our cast. There are lots and lots of minor characters in this book. They are extremely well fleshed out, but we have a central core cast of characters, more or less 10 people. I thought I would introduce you to that cast of characters so that you know who they are, so that you get a sense of who they are. And as a little bit of fun, I thought I would engage in a bit of casting. Because that's always fun, to cast But first, I'll describe them. And of course, the character that we want to talk about first is Duke Leto Atreides. You will hear Dune Bro. There are Dude Bro, Dune Bro snobs who will ostentatiously pronounce it Leto Atreides. It doesn't really make a difference. These characters don't, in fact, exist. I call him Duke Leto Atreides. You're free to call him anything you want. You can call him Larry if you want. But he is the head of House Atreides. And in many odd ways, he's a man alone. Very much intentionally made that way by Frank Herbert. He is a duke. He is a distaff royal cousin to the emperor. He is beloved. He rules by virtue. He's a stern man, but he earns the loyalty of all of his followers, who follow him fanatically, not because he oppresses them or makes them wealthy, but because they sense his goodness. They sense that he is a noble man, a noble warrior duke, the good duke. But I say that he's a man alone in the fact that he, for instance, doesn't have a duchess. And we'll get to that. And he doesn't seem to have any brothers or sisters who would be lords or ladies in his court and wield power. And he doesn't have any children but one. He has one son. And we'll get to him as well. And that's it. Nobody else. And his father, the old duke, is dead. So he is a central character in these early chapters. And I say he doesn't have a duchess, but he does have a lady. There is a woman who runs his household and who has his complete love and his complete trust. Jessica is her name, the Lady Jessica. She's not his duchess because he's never married her. Her origins are, at the time, at the beginning of this book, largely unknown. Several of Duke Leto's war masters and employees have looked into it. It looks like she's an orphan who was raised by the Bene Gesserit, that secretive all-women society that trains their acolytes not only in the exceptional powers of the body, but exceptional powers of the mind and of perception. Jessica is Bene Gesserit. And we learn fairly early on in this book that her connection with Duke Leto was very much the product of connivance on the part of the sisterhood. Not just to get her in with a powerful ducal household, but also as part of their secret breeding program. She has been ordered to give Duke Leto a daughter. The Bene Gesserit, one of the amazing powers that the spice gives them over their own body and their own biochemistry, is that a Bene Gesserit acolyte can easily determine herself the sex of her unborn baby. So Jessica has been ordered to give the Duke a daughter. The sisterhood plans a mating with that daughter and another bloodline that they have been carefully curating. And we'll get to all of that in the course of this book. You don't need to think about all of that now. All you need to know about the Lady Jessica is those two things. One thing is that she's Bene Gesserit. So there is the shadow of divided loyalties here. And the second thing is that she deeply loves her Duke, and he deeply loves her. There's no artifice about that. That is not the product of manipulation. That is completely real. They love each other. The only reason that the Duke has not made her his Duchess is not because he's some sort of social snob. It's because as long as he is technically unmarried, all the other great houses think that maybe there's a chance they should stay on his good side and put one of their daughters in his way. Maybe there's a chance. He has a mistress, sure, but he doesn't have a wife. And becoming the Duchess Atreides would be a big deal. It's a political maneuver, that's all. And Jessica understands that. It doesn't affect their love at all. She's actually an incredible help to him, as Bene Gesserit are to anyone. They are an incredible help. These are extremely capable super nuns. And in running his ducal household, Duke Leto has the advice and the assistance of a few key trusted personnel. Again, far too few. This is once again a tactical decision on Frank Herbert's part to keep his cast manageable. Believe it or not, I know those of you who have never read this book but have only heard about it won't believe this, but Frank Herbert is at many turns in this book trying to make things less intimidating. He was a megawatt brain and a super nerd, so he works at it against his own purposes plenty of in the course of this book. But he is trying. He doesn't labor you with a gigantic cast of characters. Duke Leto, as the head, the long-term head of a warrior fighting noble house, should have a huge staff of key players, and he doesn't. He has just a handful of key players. Probably the most colorful of these and the most memorable is a figure named Gurney Halleck, who has an extremely violent checkered past with the Harkonnens. Duke Leto rescues him from a slave pit. He has been tortured and disfigured, scarred for life by the Harkonnens. He hates them with a white-hot intensity. And he is a master warrior on his own and also a war master. He's not just a great fighter on his own, which is, as we mentioned in the Dune primer, all of a sudden an important thing, because you have to use swords and knives in this future world. But also a great war master. He also commands incredible loyalty from the large group of military men that are deputed under his control in Duke Leto's house. Very little misses. Gurney Halleck misses very little, we're told. The Duke says his eyes miss very little. But he has a dash of color to him because he's also a troubadour. He carries a balisette that he will occasionally take out and strum, play impromptu songs to lighten the mood or to drive a point home. And he has an effortless quotation ability. He can quote from literature, body and otherwise, for any occasion. The Duke jokes at one point in Dune to his men, someday I'll catch that man without an appropriate quote and he'll seem naked. But we never do find Gurney Halleck without an appropriate quote. So he is an odd and interesting figure. And all of the key figures here in the staff that I'm going to talk about have performed parenting roles on the Duke's heir, who we'll get to. All of them have. They've all trained the ducal heir in one way or another, in one capacity or another. Probably the most formidable of Duke Leto's staff is Thufir Hawat, who is his mentat. And not, we mentioned in the Dune primer that because advanced machinery is forbidden in this future world, humans have had to grow, they've had to adapt the ability to do what advanced machinery does, including computers, computational devices, incredible masses of information that are funneled not through an AI, but through a person. Those people are mentats. That's what they're called, mentats. They're extremely valuable. They have a training camp, a training world of their own. They're extremely valuable. Every house tries to have one and largely will succeed or fail in mercantile operations, in military operations, any of the clandestine operations that they conduct against each other, on the strength of how good their mentat is. And Thufir Hawat has been a mentat for House Atreides for 3 generations. He was a mentat for the old Duke, who we never meet. He's dead by the time this book starts. He's been a mentat for a long time for Duke Leto Atreides. Duke Leto says at one point in this book that they've taken many scars for each other. They've had many adventures together. And, by extension, he is the house mentat and master assassin for the ducal heir. An interesting tidbit about Thufir Hawat, aside from his vast amount of capability and experience, he is the oldest and most trusted of Duke Leto's aides, is that assassin bit. Mentats are trained to be computational devices, to use computational projections of information and vast amounts of data. To have one that's also a killer, that also has tactical awareness, is an extra bonus. It can't help but think that Thufir Hawat's abilities have been a large part of the rise and prominence and sustainability of House Atreides. But you also need boots on the ground. You also need champion fighters. Gurney Halleck is a champion fighter, and there is one other champion fighter in the household of Duke Leto. And you're going to have to know these characters. There are all sorts of other characters that are going to be named, but you don't have to know them. You have to know this core cast. And it's not that big a cast. It's not that intimidating. The champion fighter that I'm talking about is a character named Duncan Idaho, who, unbeknownst to Frank Herbert when he wrote this book, and unbeknownst to Dune readers when they read it originally, is going to have a huge part to play in all of Frank Herbert's Dune novels. A gigantically outsized part that the other characters don't have. But you don't have to worry about that. For this book, you don't have to worry about that. All you have to know is that Duncan Idaho is young. He's younger than Gurney Halleck. He's younger than Thufir Hawat, or much younger than Thufir Hawat. He also performs a kind of paternal role for the ducal heir, although maybe the role of an older brother. He's a romantic figure, very attractive to the ladies, very charismatic, but also has a kind of warrior bravado about him that makes him instantly appealing to other warriors, including the natives of Dune, the Fremen, who we're going to meet. I'm going to do another video, but we don't have to deal with them. We don't have to deal with the Fremen today. But Duncan Idaho immediately appeals to them. They sense right away his valor. An odd, creaky word, an odd, creaky medieval concept, but Frank Herbert loved those kinds of concepts. And Duncan Idaho embodies valor. But not all of Duke Leto's assistants and ablest lieutenants are fighters. In addition to having a mentat, which every royal house, every ducal house really needs, Duke Leto also has a trusted doctor, Dr. Yueh, who has been to the Suk Imperial Medical College, which not only gives doctors the best medical training, but also conditions them. They get an unbreakable mental conditioning that makes them trustworthy for their employer. And you can understand right away, in a version of the Italian Renaissance, you can understand right away why you would want that conditioning and why you'd want to advertise it. Because your doctor can't be turnable. He can't be slipping you poison. He's going to be in the most intimate situation with you and your wife and your children. He has to have a conditioning that makes him trustworthy. I might point out here a joke that has gone around in the United States for a long time about corporate names. I'm always reminded of that joke when I think about Dr. Yueh. People joking that, for instance, the most prominent American airline company has a name that can be pronounced Boing, which is not comforting. The most prominent United States package delivery system has a name that can be pronounced Oops. And the Imperial Medical College in Dune can be pronounced Suck. So, well, a little bit of foreshadowing, but we'll get to it. We'll get to Dr. Yueh in time. He is a far more meditative person in the realm of bringing up the ducal heir. He is a doctor. He is in a position of extreme quiet confidence. He is not dealing with any kind of military training. All the others, Thufir Hawat, Duncan Idaho, and Gurney Halleck, are all involved in training the heir. Not just to be a good man, but be a good fighter. Dr. Yueh sort of rounds out the theme of this household. But this is not the only major house that we meet at the beginning of this book. Our cast of characters has to be rounded out again by the bad guys. As I mentioned, House Harkonnen, the original fiefdom holders on Dune, the ones who are being displaced at the beginning of this book, are the villains of the book. They are the bad guys. And they are led by Vladimir Harkonnen himself, the Baron Harkonnen, who's the head of their household, a morbidly obese man who needs anti-gravity suspensors simply to move around comfortably because he's so big. He is extremely formidable, extremely vicious, and has a fairly monochromatic supervillain dastardly plan to attack his enemy, Duke Leto. But the Baron has lieutenants of his own. He has two main lieutenants of his own. A minor lieutenant of his. Some readers of Dune might quibble with my description of this character as minor, but he also has a mentat. Peter de Vries is his mentat, and his mentat is warped. Peter de Vries is not an assassin and a tactician like Thufir Hawat. He's simply a psychotic. He's a demented killer who is also a mentat. Interesting to note here, just as a side note before we move on, that the two mentats that we see in this book are both not prime. Thufir Hawat is past his prime. He is old. Too old, maybe, to have his position. And Peter de Vries is not sane. So we don't actually see in the novel Dune what a fully functioning mentat would be like. But that's just a minor thing. I'm not including Peter de Vries as a major cast character. Instead, I'm talking about two other characters in the orbit of the Baron. And that is a character named Beast Rabban. One of the Baron's nephews is a character named Rabban. He is thuggish. He is brutal. He is the hobnail boot of the Baron on the necks of the people of Dune. He's the one who implements those horrific policies designed to keep the people down, designed to make them hopeless, helpless slaves, and designed to extract as much work out of them as possible. And we are told also early on in the book, so I'm not spoiling anything here, we're also told that Raban hunts the native people, the Fremen, for sport. So he's just a brutal Gauleiter. His opposite number, also in the orbit of the Baron, is another nephew, Feyd-Rautha, who is very different from Beast Raban. Feyd-Rautha is sleek and elegant. He is far more intelligent, far more deadly, far more formidable. Very much his uncle's heir, very much cut in his uncle's mold. Not in the physical mold. The Baron Harkonnen is, we're told over and over again in this book that he is enormously, grotesquely fat. Now, I will be coming to that. I will be coming to all of these things as we discuss this book. But Feyd-Rautha is not. He's a dreamboat. He is a lethal young man. He's been thoroughly trained in combat. And in the devious arts of statecraft. He doesn't get the kind of lessons that the ducal heir of Atreides does because he's not being raised as a good person or by a good person. But that brings us, those are the bad guys, the House Harkonnen. There's Baron Harkonnen, Beast Raban, and Feyd-Rautha. And that brings us to the ducal heir, who is the star of this book. Duke Leto Atreides' only son, Paul Atreides, who in this book is 15 years old when we first meet him, and small for his age. He has been raised by those war masters that I mentioned. Gurney Halleck and Duncan Idaho and Thufir Hawat have been trying to train him in all kinds of things. How to do hand-to-hand combat in this weird world of swords and force shields, but no guns. How to work out tactics. How to scope out a room. But he's also receiving training from his mother. He's been receiving Bene Gesserit training in perception and understanding, and even the rudiments of another Bene Gesserit superpower called the Voice, where they can get the register of someone, learn that person's vocal and personal tics and registers, and thereby have the ability to paralyze them vocally for short periods of time. Jessica is training Paul in all of that, not just the Bene Gesserit superpowers, as I call them. We'll get to that as well, but also the Bene Gesserit physical ability. A thing that is not stressed very strongly in this book, but is nevertheless true, is that the Bene Gesserit have a physical regimen of hand-to-hand combat. As I've mentioned many times before when I talk about this book, it's entirely likely that in unarmed, non-shielded hand-to-hand combat, the Lady Jessica could easily handle Gurney Halleck or Duncan Idaho. And she is training Paul in that method of unarmed combat that's going to become extremely important later in this book and in a very crucial way. And that is our cast. That is not so intimidating. You have the Duke, his lady, his son, his attendants, just 3 of them, if you don't count Dr. Yueh, and then the bad guys, the Baron and 2 of his henchmen who happen to be blood related to him. That's not that much. That's not hard. You notice who's not present. The Imperium. The Emperor's household is not present at the beginning of this book. You don't need to worry about it. Don't even need to think about them. By the time you get to them, by the time they have more presence in this book, you'll be so comfortable that you'll welcome the addition. There's nothing intimidating about this at all. That is a small cast. You have the Duke, his lady, his son, a few of his employees, the Baron, and his 2 conniving, evil, sniveling nephews. That's it. That's all. So that's not much. That's a cast that you can handle. You will not have trouble keeping those names straight at all. I have complete confidence in you. Don't let that or anything else get in the way of you enjoying this book. And don't let anyone tell you that enjoying a book should be hard or painful or make you slap your head or keep a note card of this, a scorecard of who the players are. That person is just a snob. You should have a complete breakdown of the gods and goddesses of Greek mythology before you bother with the Iliad. There are no suffering points in reading. There is no value in scrabbling and clawing your way to an understanding of a book. Come to the understanding of its terms before you read it, so that you can concentrate on the artistry involved. but now that we've gone over the cast, I want to go over the casting, because that's always fun. I love doing it. And for my casting of the characters that I've just named, I want to range over all of time and space. And here I am slightly defying the Butlerian Jihad because it's, I think, a rock-solid certainty that soon, if it isn't already able to do it, AI will be able to do this for us. So that if you cast a movie and you want, I don't even know, uh, 15-year-old Drew Barrymore, uh, uh, Peter O'Toole at age 18 or age 20. You could easily do it. You can tell your casting AI director what you want and get it. So you have a movie and you have a role exactly in mind for Jean Reno. But Jean Reno is 70. He can't do it. He can't do the role that you're talking about. What you're thinking of is Jean Reno when he was 30. Well, I believe firmly that in the casting future, you'll be able to have that. In other words, to speak solely from the heart, to speak of a dream of mine, I'll be able to have an original cast Star Trek movie in which the Enterprise comes home at the end of the first 5-year mission. So all the cast when they're young-ish. So that's the kind of casting that I'm doing for Dune here, is ideal dream casting. I am not going with currently working actors and actresses unless I feel like it. I thought one toehold for this dream casting should be that I should leave one person in a role that they have played for some adaptation of Dune. And I also want to engage in a fad in current Hollywood that is often done for the wrong reasons, but that can be done for the right reasons, which is race swapping. As far as we can tell, Herbert he's never actually all that clear about it. But as far as we can tell, this and all the books that follow it are all white people. And except in a tiny handful of cases, there's no actual reason for that. Nothing will change in the book, in other words, if you do that. So I'm not going to, in one case, I'm not going to do that, just as in, for instance, Denis Villeneuve's big, gigantic hit of a 2-part adaptation of this novel, he race swaps Thufir Hawat. I don't have an objection with that. I have an objection with the actor that he chose. I have an objection with the way he does Thufir Hawat in the movie, not with the concept. So, that throat clearing underway, I want to cast my Duke Leto. And my Duke Leto is Richard Burton at age 50. So, the peak of his career, but not the Richard Burton that you would probably remember if you even know who he is at all. You can Google him if you're very young. You might not know. But for Duke Leto, you want someone who is not only commanding, but also believable as a charismatic figure. Which means that the Duke Leto, for instance, in the sci-fi adaptation of Dune, which is excellent, you really ought to watch it, that Duke Leto is William Hurt. And William Hurt is many things on the screen. I'm a big appreciator of what he brings to the screen, but he's not charismatic. You can't cast him that way. And it doesn't work. He's not believable if you do. Whereas Richard Burton has charisma in buckets. You could believe him. If he were in the right register and the right uniform, you could definitely believe that he could command the unquestioning loyalty of his men. For Lady Jessica, you want someone much younger than the Duke, I think. It doesn't have to look that way. Richard Burton at 50 could easily look like he was at 35 or 39, something like that. And for Lady Jessica, I want Vanessa Redgrave at around age 25. So half the age on the birth certificate of my Duke Leto. But I don't think it would look that way. And for Lady Jessica, you want someone who is beautiful, of course. Again, you'll have to Google. You young people have to Google Vanessa Redgrave. If you just type in her name to Google, you're going to get an image of an 80-year-old woman who is still extremely beautiful, but you're not going to have any conception, not only of how beautiful she was, but also how otherworldly she was. I think that's an important quality in Lady Jessica, is that she's not normal. The Bene Gesserit are not normal. They are a gust of wind from another world. And I think Vanessa Redgrave would work perfectly. Vanessa Redgrave at 25 is not only able to hold a dramatic scene, but you completely believe that she is full of secrets. You completely believe that. So I want her as my Lady Jessica. Then we get to Gurney Halleck. And for Gurney Halleck, you want someone who is rough. Gurney Halleck may be, I described him as a troubadour, but he's not polished at all, like Dr. Yueh. Not at all. You want someone where you look at him and you think, this person has been in fights. But you also want someone who's believable as a troubadour, which is the downfall of most castings of Gurney Halleck, is that they're not believable. Josh Brolin is not believable as a troubadour. For my Gurney Halleck, I want Johnny Cash at age 40. You completely believe that he could pick up a balsette or a guitar and start thinking aloud in song. but you also believe that he's been in his share of honky-tonk stomp downs. And you want that dichotomy in Gurney Halleck. Then we get to Thufir Hawat. For Thufir Hawat, I think you need ice. I think you need someone who, the minute he speaks, you believe that this person has masterminded the downfall of whole families. He doesn't have to say it. And for this, I want Peter Cushing, who, those of you who are young will know him as Grand Moff Tarkin in the first Star Wars movie. And I want him at about that age. I definitely don't want Thufir Hawat when he is young enough so that you don't believe that he would maybe be losing his edge, which is one of the problems that I had with Denis Villeneuve's casting. The other problem being that you want a Thufir Hawat who is believable as someone in physical combat, someone who could be dangerous in a corner. And Thufir Hawat in the first part of Denis Villeneuve's Dune is a roly-poly Santa figure. You don't picture him being dangerous at all. And that, I think that element has to be there for Thufir Hawat. He can't teach other people to be dangerous if he's not dangerous himself. He isn't just a Mentat. He's a Mentat assassin. So Peter Cushing. And then we come to Duncan Idaho. And here I want to go with a little bit of an unconventional casting. Here I want to pick Regé-Jean Page, who, if you know that name at all, you know him from Bridgerton. I think he would be perfect as Duncan Idaho. And not just because of the job that he does in Bridgerton. I think it takes 2 seconds watching him in Bridgerton to know that he could do anything at all. This actor deserves the world. I think he can do anything. I think he could be a very good Duncan Idaho. Duncan Idaho is not just a warrior. We see him in other registers as well, including some that are fairly pathetic. I think he would work really, really well in that role. No offense to Jay Momoa. Then for Dr. Yueh, you want someone who can be avuncular, but who's also completely convincing as maybe having dark secrets of his own. And there was an actor named George Sanders. I don't know that if you're born in the 21st century, you won't know him at all. If you've ever watched one of the greatest movies ever made, is a movie called All About Eve, and he's in that movie. He plays a little bit against type in that movie. You can find him in other movies where he's completely on brand, as we say, in the 21st century. George Sanders would be my choice for Dr. Yueh. It's not a big role, but I think he'd be really good at it. I think he would actually pull at the heartstrings, which Dr. Yueh should do, and very seldom does in film version of Dune. Then we get to the Harkonnens, and for Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, I don't have any choice at all except Orson Welles. No way at all. The big problem that I have with Baron Harkonnen, as he has been portrayed in now 3 different video adaptations of this book, is that he is not frightening. He is a silly figure. He's utterly ridiculous. He's completely out of his mind in the Dune movie from 80 years ago. And a very good actor plays him in the Sci-Fi Channel movie, but he plays him as an effete buffoon, someone who speaks in rhyming couplets, for Pete's sake. You never for a minute believe that he's dangerous. And the same thing in Denis Villeneuve's Dune. No offense at all to Stellan Skarsgård. He's a fantastic actor, but what on earth is going on with that Baron Harkonnen? He's not frightening. He's a weird circus act. No. Orson Welles, I think, could probably do it. You want someone huge, an actor who's huge physically. So I'd want Orson Welles later in his life. But you want someone with a booming voice, someone with a definite presence, someone who can be threatening. Then for Beast Raban, here is where I will include a toehold in some previous version, because I think Dave Bautista does a great job as Beast Raban in Denis Villeneuve's Dune. It's a one-note performance. He's just a frothing maniac, but I think he's believable as that. So I would want him. And since I'm going to include him, I won't include any other toeholds in other adaptations. I think that Austin Butler does a great job as Feyd-Rautha in Denis Villeneuve's Dune. Almost steals the movie. I think he does a great job, but I've already included one previously cast person, so I'm not going to include him. Instead, I'm going to use the timey-wimey device. I'm going to pick an actor from the myths of the past. Now, AI could easily simulate these people at any age. All you have to do is feed in all of the video performances and all of the interviews, all of which is on tape. And an AI could do it. And for Feyd-Rautha, I want an actor named Roddy McDowall at age 20. I don't know if you're born in the 21st century, you might not know who Roddy McDowall is. He was great. He was absolutely great. Better, by far, than his most famous roles would lead you to believe. He never turned down a role. That could be a problem. He never turned down a role, which means you'll see him everywhere. But you'll seldom see him good. But when he was good, he was great. He would be fantastic as Feyd-Rautha, I think. Definitely the element of physical menace. Because when he was in his 20s, he moved like a cat. Actually, he moved like a cat for his whole life. But when he moved in his 20s, you could definitely feel menace in the room. Feyd-Rautha is an intentionally sensual kind of menace. And Roddy McDowall can handle that, let's just say. And that brings us to Paul Atreides, who is the star of the show. If you don't get Paul Atreides right, you have badly misserved your version of Dune. And Paul Atreides has never been cast correctly. In the ancient Dune movie, he's played by someone who just doesn't know what he's doing, has no idea what kind of a role, and is too old. In the Sci-Fi Channel, he's played by an actor who is fairly bland. You don't ever believe that he's going through any kind of crisis, much less the 3 big crises that Paul Atreides goes through in just this one book. You don't believe it. Alec Newman is a good set of cheekbones, but you don't believe it. You don't believe him as Paul Atreides. And what can I say about Timothée Chalamet as Paul Atreides in Denis Villeneuve's Dune movies? What can I say that I haven't said a million times before? I do not understand, except for physical looks alone, I do not understand the world-striding domination of this actor. It's on full display. What I don't understand about it is on full display in Denis Villeneuve's Dune movies. It's an utterly stoned, one-note, monotone performance. He does not ever seem tormented. He does not ever seem angry. He does not ever seem proud. He does not ever seem certainly in love. No, none of the things that you want in Paul Atreides are in that performance. You have to just look around it at the rest of the movie. So I would want a young man, a young male actor, who can do all those registers convincingly. And the actor that I would want would be Andrew Garfield. A young Andrew Garfield. Maybe the age he is when he was first Spider-Man. I would want that Andrew Garfield. Now, Andrew Garfield is a nuclear strength a-hole, but that doesn't matter. Not most of the actors that I'm talking about weren't angels. That doesn't matter. What matters is that he's got the chops to do it. A young Andrew Garfield would be great as Paul Atreides. So that would be my ideal cast for the cast that I describe in this video. And your ideal cast will, of course, vary. But the point here is that the cast is not large. So the premise is not complicated, and the cast is not large. So why have you been intimidated by this book? There is no good reason. There is no good reason. So we're going to move on. We've got just a few days left until Dune in June starts. That is your cast. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I will see you next time. Thank you.